This is Laura DeFranco, holistic physical therapist and owner of Brave Healer Productions. I'm excited to bring you my new holistic healing series where you're going to learn from the experts what it means to live fiercely alive, mind, body, and soul. I invite you now to take a breath, relax, and feel the vibe of the words my guest has to share with you today. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited to have Kiana Balacich on the show today. She's here to help me with this mission I have to change the world one brave word at a time. And you guys are going to love her words because she is a poet, and I love interviewing poets. Kiana is a writer from New York. Her poetry has been published in Eve Poetry Magazine and the Whippoorwill Quarterly Press. She partnered with the group Poet Connection on Instagram to develop a poetry contest inspired by original music. We need to ask her to tell us about that because it sounds like a really cool story. Kiana plays guitar and tries to live life to the fullest. And you guys are going to find her on Instagram at kmusic1318. And I'll have you guys linked up in the show notes today. Welcome, Kiana.
Thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so I really do want you to, because you were telling me this story before we started today, and I want you to tell them about this poetry contest thing. What did you guys do?
So Poet Connection is an awesome group on Instagram. They celebrate original poetry and they have daily posts. They'll read poems aloud. They'll create a reel to really bring out the most unique parts of your writing. And it's all about celebrating original poetry. And I was so happy to collaborate with them this year on a contest that celebrates original poetry. I was asked to create clips of 30-second songs. I use my guitar and my piano, and we released these musical clips on their Instagram page. And we welcomed writers to listen to the music, embrace it, interpret the music as they may, and create original pieces of poetry. And we were so happy to see the diversity in the results. There were so many different unique spins on each piece of music, and we celebrated all of them. It was really fun, and I was really happy to see how many people participated and really put their heart and soul into it.
That's awesome. So awesome. You guys are going to find that group on Instagram at Poet Connection. Did I get that right?
Yes, that
Poet Connection. Okay, awesome. So tell our viewers a little bit about you. Tell us your story. How'd you get to doing this poetry, music, awesomeness thing?
I've been writing for as long as I can remember. Growing up, singing and reading and writing were like my intrinsic forms of entertainment. I would always be walking around the house singing songs from Disney movies and writing stories, and it followed me throughout my life. And I've always been writing. And during this past year, I got on Instagram and I was following really great poets that I loved reading. And I was writing my own poetry. And once I started attending virtual open mics, I was so inspired by the words they were sharing, the energy and the positivity, especially during this, this difficult, unprecedented time. I think that as more of us are spending time indoors, we've still been looking for that type of like authentic artistic connection. And while the in-person open mics were in kind of this hiatus, hibernation mode for now, it's keep trying to remind myself it's temporary, but we've been flocking to social media and Zooms for these open mics. And I attended your open mics with Kaniki, Jakarta, and they were fabulous, really soulful, really positive. And once I was participating in these events, I was like, I would love to contribute. Like, I have been writing poetry, and I'm like, I've been moved genuinely by the words and the energy. And maybe if I post things that I've written, I can give back and give someone that experience. So I started posting around last April. I kind of just threw a couple of haikus out there. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to read this, but I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. And the response, it was like I was really grateful that, you know, so many readers were telling me, they were like, oh my gosh, like this really connects with me. Like, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And I focus on healing with my writing and music. And I think the response, or people like tell me that it really helps them, I feel like so surprised that like I put my poem out there and someone took the time to read it, and that makes me really happy. And then, you know, knowing that it helps to help them shift in their consciousness, to put them in a more positive place, I'm like, my cup is full, and I'm like so grateful, and it motivates me to like keep writing and keep sharing.
Yeah, there's purpose in it, isn't there? And you and I have a lot in common with the way that we think about writing and speaking and music and any form of that kind of expression as healing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I want to back up for just a second and just say thank you to Kiniki Jakarta. She and I co-hosted Open Mic and Spotlights, which is an event that is mostly on Facebook, you guys, if you want to go look us up in our past events. But Open Mic and Spotlights was, thank you so much for talking about that and about the vibe, because we had a goal to really bring that positive vibe and a safe space for people to share, whether you were first time sharing with strangers or whether you had done it 100 times or 1,000 times or whatever. And it really ended up being all that, right? It ended up having that feel, and I'm so happy and grateful that that you felt it, you know, and that you've been moved by those kinds of events. Man, I'm with you, girl. Like I crave that. I miss in person, and I know that'll come soon enough. But for now, we do have some really powerful communities that people are coming together in, you know, to do that. So I know that reading and writing are some of the most powerful awareness tools there are, and I know you do too. So talk to me more about how you think about that. How does that play out in your own life?
For me, writing is a way for me to process the world. I think in terms of words, and the poems, I've joked around that like sometimes the poems kind of fall out. Like, I work indoors, so I need to, like, I'm an active person, so I need to go for a walk, you know, on my lunch break. And especially now that we're all indoors, like most of the time, you know, many of us. And oftentimes when I'm walking around and I'm just like reflecting on my day and like conversations I've had, I'll start to think of like comparisons and like metaphors. And for example, one time I was on my lunch break last February, and I was walking in Brooklyn, and at a red light there was an SUV playing a song, and it was a song by The Weeknd, and it had a really great groove, and I knew the song already, and something about the song just really sparked this memory, and I felt my fingers kind of curl in, and I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, huh, like, why did I have that emotional response? Like, I'm walking, I'm literally crossing the street, and I'm like, why do I feel my fingers curling in? What's that about? And I'm reflecting on this as I'm walking. And I'm like, like, I don't feel like I'm angry, you know, like I'm not curling up my fists like out of fury. No, it's not like that. I kind of feel like I'm trying to catch something that's slipping away. And I thought about and I processed that as I was walking. And by the time I got back to work, I was on my phone and notepad, like typing up this poem. And I wrote about, like, you know, reflecting on a relationship that was basically on its way out, coming to an end. We realized we wanted different things. And I realized that when my fingers curled in, it was like emotional response to hearing that song, thinking of the good memories and trying to catch something that's slipping away. So that poem was an opportunity for me to like process with emotions, with like tactile details. And it was like inspired by the music I heard at the red light. So whoever that driver was playing like that song Z100 or whatever radio station, like thank you, because it helped me to process my life and reflect what was going on at the time.
Well, that takes a certain amount of awareness and you're speaking about your own practice. You can be walking across the street, staring at your texts, not present. Well, don't do that, you guys. Or you can be walking and really feeling the world around you and sensing and hearing the song and letting the vibration of that energy into you, and noticing your response, your own response. And I think that is what I love so much about talking about awareness, is that's a foundation for all healing, I believe.
I love that. I love the phrase. I love the way you put that all into one sentence. I feel like those are words that I'm always trying to like think about and like trying to find a way to explain that. But I love how you just said that, like awareness being like that root of healing. That is so inspiring.
And I think sharing it in the form of your poetry, or even here on the podcast today, just sharing your process and what happens in you when that happens. These are gifts to other people, because they will recognize themselves in moments like yours. They'll recognize, their own reactions or their own responses as that. So that's why talking about it, I think, is so important. So I'm curious. So do you remember when you got in front of strangers for the first time to share a poem or a song? Can you tell us that story? Okay.
It was the summertime, and I was doing like a Pilates workout outside. And after my workout was finished, I usually do meditation. Like I'll do like Savasana or like corpse pose and like really relax my muscles and focus on my breathing and try to like zone out of like my word-based conscious thinking and go into this state of like awareness of like tactile awareness. And I did that for like a few minutes, and then when I woke up, I had like the most compelling force, like this most compelling need to go on Instagram. And I know that sounds weird. Like I'm not hooked up to my phone. Like I have the Instagram limit. Like I only go on for 30 minutes and then I pull myself away. But I feel like it was something to do with my crown chakra in that meditation, where something in the universe was like persuading me to go on Instagram, and I did. And there was this one of the poets that I like collaborate with and like chat with, and we give each other feedback. I had a notification that she was live with like an open mic, and this was the first time I ever heard of an open mic on Instagram. I was like, oh, she's live. What is she doing? Is she doing like a Q&A? Is she sharing poems? So I selected it, and she was on there like being soulful and like sharing her poetry. And somebody who they ended up being the Sugar Plum and the Grumbling Growler down in Florida. They do host open mics, but since like the pandemic, they transferred their open mics onto Instagram, and they were hosting, and Lex was the host, and she's really sweet. What a great listener and awesome host. And like, I was like, what a great safe space to share artwork and poetry. And at that time I had never shared anything online before, but listening to the authentic connection and listening and appreciation for art, I was like, wow, this is cool. So I actually was like parked there on my yoga mat with my phone in my hands, like eating it up and like commenting and like sending up the hearts on the side and being like a good audience member. And I was like, I just wrote a poem last night. I wonder what would happen if I shared it. Like, let me just get outside my comfort zone. So I went inside and I got my notebook. And I was like, I told my sister's also a writer. And I came in the house and I was like, hey, I'm going to do an open mic. She's like, what do you mean? Everything's closed. I was like, no, it's like on my phone. It's the coolest thing ever. So I went on and I shared one of my poems with Lex. And like, she was such a great listener. And in the comments, people were like, oh, I get you. I feel you. Yeah, I get it. And I felt that way too. And it was a really cool experience. And then I was going to more open mics. And the first time I ever shared with music was at your open mic with Kaniki. And I did my poem, My Own Fog. and I brought my guitar, and I was like, I've never done this before. I just wonder what would happen if I did. And I tried it, and I've been hooked ever since.
Oh my gosh, maybe I didn't realize that was the first time of you doing it that night. That's amazing. You're so amazing. Your voice is amazing. The guitar is amazing. And so is your poetry. You know, I didn't ask you earlier, but did you bring any poetry to share today?
I have my guitar beside me, and if you would like to listen, I would love to share.
Yes, let's do it. Go ahead, grab it. I should have prepared you, but you know, you seem to be an in the moment kind of gal, so let's do it.
So this poem is called My Own Fog. When I drive into Brooklyn, I cross the bridge over the bay, and I can see the city skyline while I ride along the highway. On sunny mornings, the buildings shimmer in shades of white and gray and blue. Before the sun rises, the windows shine like the stars at night do. But on foggy days, it's hazy and all I see is a white cloud. The city of 8 million is hidden and not a single building can be found. I see the way the fog hides the view. It reminds me of all the hiding that I used to do. I was too scared people would think I was weak, so I always covered my eyes when they leave. I hid my pain under my own fog. I tried to be so quiet when I sobbed. I worked hard to keep up the act, like it was my job. There were times I didn't know who to trust, and I felt so frustrated, like I couldn't see beyond my fears, and I believed that no one wanted to hear me if I were to say that I'm not okay. But I never found peace, disguising what I feel. Found out who my real friends are when I started to keep it real. I let the fake ones fall away and the real ones hold me up like steel. I wish I never spent all that time just trying to conceal. I wish I would have known sooner that there's a better way to heal. Now I put my pen to the page so I can engage with what I feel inside. Now I unleash the tide that's been welling up for so long. I'm picking up the pieces of what went wrong, and I'm finding peace in writing this song. Thank you so much for listening, Laura. I appreciate it.
Give you some snaps for that. I got goosebumps. Thank you. Oh my goodness. All right, listen, tell us about Harmony After the Discord.
Harmony After the Discord it started as a poem that I wrote about my relationship with music and how music helps me to reflect and link up with the perspective of the songwriter and the artist. And it helps me to process the world and my emotions. And I wrote a poem called Harmony After the Discord, and it was published this year in Eve Poetry magazine. And Eve Poetry magazine is run by Deanna Ramirez, and she also does open mics on Instagram. And last night I was at an open mic and I did my own fog, and really great experience. And that's like another great place to share original poetry. And yeah, like the response to that poem has been, I've been so grateful for the response. So many people connect with it. That idea of, you know, like finding peace and healing after a difficult experience. And I made that metaphor with music because oftentimes in music theory, I write songs, like I wrote the chords for that poem. And oftentimes in music theory, we will use like a chord that has discord at its root. Like oftentimes like the seventh note in a scale will bring this sort of feeling of conflict. And that's a great way to link up what you're saying in the lyrics with the sound of the music. And then we'll follow up with a resolution, and a chord like the home notes, the home chords, the root notes. And those will be those feelings of completion and wholeness. And I linked up my understanding and experiences with music theory and made the metaphor to experiences with life. Like we can have these moments of discord and complexity and confusion and conflict where things don't feel like they're going the right way. They feel uncomfortable. then we go through this healing process, and then we do find this harmony where notes do feel like they vibe and things feel good, and we find people who understand, and things are, running more smooth. And yeah, I was happy to share that poem. And once I saw that that was something people connected with and were like thanking me for sharing, it was like, I think this is what I want to focus my energy on. This is going to be my mission. I'm going to write a collection of poems on music and healing. And my mission is going to be to share that, so that way I can contribute. And like the songs that have helped me and the poems that have helped me, like this is my way of giving back. So hopefully these words could continue to help people and inspire people.
Awesome. So that's a book that you're working on right now. Maybe out in 2021, we hope, maybe, who knows? Okay. Okay. So there, the obvious thing to me is that there's healing power in the expression of brave words, whether they be written or spoken or sung. We talked about it a little bit today, but for the listeners out there, what do you think is the easiest way to start? Like, have you always been a journaler? Is that where you started? Like, talk about that a little bit.
I recently got into journaling like 2 years ago at the suggestion of a friend, and it's been great. Like I started a gratitude journal, which it's part of my daily practice. When I wake up, I'll write about 10 things I'm grateful for and one goal that I have for the day. And it helps me to wake up with clarity and appreciate the things that might get overlooked if I just wake up and try to eat really fast and go to work. So it helps me to be more centered. And I think the start of writing and healing is just like you said, Laura. It's awareness. And I think the way to start writing something that feels authentic is to be aware. Like find a way to be aware in your life, whether it's a gratitude journal or if it's yoga, taking time out to take 5 to 10 minutes to just listen to yourself breathe. It helps you to clear your mind. It's helped me to clear my mind and recognize what's most important to me. And I've found that music is something that's super important to me. And, I've found that out by clearing away the things that, don't matter as much. There was a time where I was trying to write poetry that didn't really sound like me. And this was like before I really got into meditation. I was trying to write something that might sound good. I tried to do a different style where I was writing kind of like a storyline, but it didn't feel like me. And I was kind of like, why am I doing this? But I think that's just kind of something that many people experience when you hit that nexus between like being a teenager and being adults. Sometimes like I felt the pressure from society to like, okay, I'm going to try to grow up in my artwork. I'm just going to try something new. But it wasn't something that felt authentic. It just kind of felt like I was trying to tell a story in a poem form, and I wasn't really happy with it. And once I got into meditation, I started to realize what's most important to me. And it's ironic that I went on my first open mic when I was meditating. Like right after I finished meditating on my yoga mat, I felt that pull in the universe, and I found the open mic. And yeah, I think awareness is the root of creativity and healing. Recognizing what's important to you and then channeling that in your art. Because like if you can write something that can target people's senses, I think that's a sign that you're aware as an artist. Like your poetry that you shared at the open mics, it's like there's so many like sense-based details that target the 5 senses. And when I was listening to you share that, I was like, wow, like Laura sounds like someone who's very aware, of the present moment. And like that's something that I vibed with.
Well, if you're feeling, they're feeling. And so it's really that's what it is. And I think a lot of us had to give ourselves permission to feel again. We've all been through whatever we've been through, man, oh man, especially this year, right? And so just giving yourself permission to feel and start there. What do I feel? I use that particular writing prompt more than any other, I think, especially when I feel like I have nothing to write or nothing to journal about that day or nothing worthy, right? So I'll just fill in the blank I feel, and that will be good enough right then. that process of clearing that space out. I'll say I write to feng shui my soul. I want to clear the space out, move that crap out so that I can be connected with that other thing that you're talking about. When you come into meditate, you know, the M word scares people, right? So it's not necessarily that you have to like sit on a pillow for an hour here. But what if you could just quiet yourself and feel for a moment and let yourself connect with that space, right? And that's where you're going to get the intuitional hits and downloads, and that message is going to come through that makes you run to Instagram and be like, "Wait, what should I be doing here?" Right? And you can follow that, and your life will follow from there. I love hearing you talk about that because it's exciting, you know. Okay, so you say the writing process is, I'm quoting you now, the writing process is an interesting dance in which writers need to balance spontaneity and form. Tell me more about that. What were you thinking when you wrote that down?
I was thinking when I wrote that down, it might be something fun to discuss. The writing process is something that I feel like is unique to so many writers. And yet, oftentimes, being a student in high school or college or what have you, I studied English, language arts, and biology and music theory in college. And like so many lessons are about form and structure. And yet, there is some sort of spontaneity, you know, and it's something that I've been conscious of, having studied English language arts, biology, and music theory. And when I was in college, I did a research, like an independent research paper on the form and function in our cells and like how our cells utilize molecules like atoms bonded to carbon and how the chemical structure is super important in the function of those molecules. And I compared that to poetry and how in modern poetry, the form of the poem, right, like the rhyme scheme or the repetition is consciously constructed by the poet. And then also in postmodernist work, you have like the elements of randomness, and that is also consciously constructed by the artist to try to convey this sort of chaos. So I feel like form is a really interesting topic in art because it it's contingent on so many decisions that the writer makes. And then also there is an element of spontaneity where writers do let go and they let the words flow, and they have to be open to being like aware and in the moment. Like when you said like one of your prompts is like, what am I feeling? It's like, it's spontaneous because like we can control many of our thoughts, and we can learn to regulate our emotions, but oftentimes thoughts and emotions can feel spontaneous. So I feel like in poetry, in the writing process, we're harnessing two things that seem diametrically opposed, but we learn to dance with them because there is like the spontaneity to embrace. And then there are lots of forms we can use to convey the message that we want to share with the reader.
I love that. Yes. And I think that people really enjoy process, right? So you're speaking about your process, about how you think about this, and when you sit down to write. I know that a lot of the times, if I just let myself flow, I feel like the words are channeled, and that's it's a tricky word to use in conversation because not everybody understands what that is until they experience that feeling. And I'm not even somebody who would have said I channel, you know, but now I know that when I connect to the place, that channel is always there. It was always there, and I can allow that message to move through, you know, all the way out my fingertips and out the pen onto the page. Do you feel moments like that are channeled, if you want to use that word?
I do.
Yeah.
When I wrote my own fog, it was like 5:30 in the morning, and I was driving over the bridge going into Brooklyn, and I was surrounded by this white cloud of fog, and I couldn't see any of the buildings because I often enjoy looking through my peripheral and like seeing the skyline of the city. But that particular day, it was like one huge cloud. It felt like I was on an airplane. You look out the window and it's clouds. And I was like, wow, you can't even tell that there's an entire city down there. And I was kind of like, you know, it kind of reminds me of how like people like we're able to hide so much. We can hide so much that's important to us. And I feel like vulnerability is something that I felt the pressure in society to try to hide. You know, when you feel anxious, you feel like you're not sure what to do. There's kind of a pressure to put on a brave face and like, you know, play like everything's okay. That way you don't end up worrying everyone. Um, and I feel like that was the impetus to write my own fog. I was like, for a long time, I was like, yeah, I'm fine. It's all good. But I was struggling with a lot of things. I was feeling anxious about a lot of things in life. And I found healing when I started opening up, when I started writing about it, when I started sharing those thoughts with my friends. And that's how I felt healing. And I cleared up the fog. And I feel like that was a moment of like channeling what was going on, processing and being aware of like the weather that day, linking that with this personal experience that I've had. And when I literally got to work, the sun didn't even come up yet. I was sitting in the parking lot on my phone, like saying this stuff out loud. And I was like in my car, saying it out loud, typing it up. And the lines that I thought of were there were times I didn't know who to trust and I felt so frustrated, like I couldn't see beyond my fears. That was the lines, those are the lines that were processing as I was like getting off the exit and like heading to work. It was like in the back of my mind. And as soon as I parked, I had to start writing it down. And I was like, never did any kind of spoken word before that. But I was like, this is something that feels like it should be spoken. I feel like the story will be more authentic and it'll connect with listeners if it's spoken. And then music has always been my way of processing and reflecting. So I was like, if I really want to tell the story truthfully, I'm going to write chords and I'm going to share this poem with chords. And it was cool. Like I've heard like Jack Kerouac do that. Jack Kerouac would write about like music and like live music performances. And there's like recordings of him like speaking his poetry, and they'll have like piano playing underneath his voice. And it's such a cool like mesh of art forms. And I had been listening to that for a couple of years. It's like on my Spotify playlist. And I was like, when I thought about my own fog coming together as maybe a spoken word piece, I was like, yeah, I want to tell the story honestly. Music has to be there. And I was like, well, Jack Kerouac has piano. I was like, I would like to try to do this with my guitar. And I'm really happy that people connect with it.
Oh, yeah. It is beautiful. Kiana, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world, for being brave enough to start to share it with us, and for being here today to share it with our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Laura. This is like a really great, inspiring conversation, and I'm so happy to have shared this with you.
You guys, go on over to Instagram right now, and you're going to find Kiana at kmusic1318. Give her a follow, please, and stay tuned for everything she has going on, the open mics, Harmony after the Discord, the poems are coming, you guys. And now that she said it out loud, I'm going to keep repeating it out loud. She's going to have to finish that book sooner or later, right? Okay. We'll hold you accountable to that. I can't wait. I can't wait to read those. Thank you guys. Any last words you want to say to our viewers about this whole topic?
Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope our conversation has inspired you to feel a sense of awareness in your life and be okay with the vulnerabilities. Like be okay with the times when you're not okay, and accept that we're human, and this could be a place of growth for you, where you could come out on the other side stronger and wiser and more supported. If you're brave enough to be vulnerable and let people help you, you can come out on the other side even more supported.
Nice. Yes. All right, you guys, I like to end the show with my favorite question ever, and here it is. What if there is something you haven't learned yet that could change everything? Be brave, you guys. See you next time. Love what you heard today. Don't forget to drop down and hit that subscribe button, you guys, and then join me over at bravehealer.com for just a little bit more healing badassery. Have a great one.